Okay, so I guess I'm going to start kind of at the beginning of getting sent to the programs. Um, I have another unique experience in that, like most program attendees, I was kidnapped uh, to begin my forcible incarceration. And when I say kidnapped, I mean kidnapped. Um, most people are usually woken up in the middle of the night out of their sleep and kidnapped, which can be very traumatic, understandably so. I was a runaway at the time. I had ran away from my father's house and had moved in with my boyfriend and his mom at the time. Um, and so my dad had to convince me to come with him. He called me up and told me that he was going to go disenroll me from public school, and I had to come with him to make it official so that I could re-enroll in the fall and continue back on. And I could feel in the pit of my stomach that just wasn't true, because I had already been communicating with the school because I was 16, and they would communicate with me because in Florida at 16 you can leave home and become an emancipated minor. So I'd already spoken with the school, and I was like, I'm already disenrolled. But I went with him anyways because, it's your parents. You don't think they're going to have you kidnapped and forcibly incarcerated. But as we were driving to Dr. Phillips High School, which was the high school I went to in Florida, in Orlando, my father pulled off. I still remember this day so vividly. He had a Infiniti QX4. They had just started coming out really with those in early 2000, and he pulled off on the side of the road into a gravel dirt road that went off into some construction area, and I could see a big black sedan parked at the end of the road, and I just started freaking out because I knew that this wasn't a good situation, and I was panicking, and I was asking my dad, what's going on, what are you doing? And I was feeling the sense of dread and fear overtake me, and he didn't say anything. He just pulled up to where the sedan was, and he leaned over my body and opened up the door and undid my seatbelt, and rather unceremoniously just shoved me out of his car onto the ground, screaming and crying. And then he pulled the door shut, and he slammed on his well, right before he pushed me out, he told me that he was sorry, but I had brought this on myself. And then he shoved me out of the car. And then he closed the door, and he stomped on the gas so hard that the wheels started spinning out, and he started kind of fishtailing. And I remember watching him fishtail down the road as gravel was hitting me in the face as I was screaming and crying. And these two big old Jamaican men, like, and when I say big, I mean like probably at least 6'4" to 6'6", and probably around 250 to 300 pounds, like big, burly Jamaican men. And this white lady were standing beside the black sedan. And the two Jamaican men just, they kind of grabbed me because I was picking myself up off the ground and trying to take off after my dad, still screaming and crying. And they grabbed me, and mind you, I'm a 16-year-old girl at the time. I think I weighed maybe 105 pounds. But I remember the one Jamaican dude grabbing me by both of my arms and just lifting me up, and then slamming me as hard as he could, it felt like, onto my stomach with my arms kind of yoked up like this behind me. And it knocked the wind out of me so hard that I puked all over myself. And so I was covered in vomit and having my arms yoked up behind me and my legs were kind of pulled behind me. And I was hogtied with handcuffs. And it actually ripped a bunch of tendons in this rotator cuff. And I still have problems really badly with the shoulder staying in socket. This one got a lot of stretching, not completely ripped, but this one was a lot of ripped ones. And then my ankle was a little sprained because I had stepped off a curb wrong a couple days prior. And when they were hog tying me, they yanked my foot, like I felt it go sideways. And they just ripped all those tendons in my ankle. And if you actually look at my ankle to this day, you can see all the bulgy tendons, and I still kind of walk with a little bit of a limp. And it was months before, and when I say months, it was like 6 months before I could even walk in Jamaica without limping noticeably, like super noticeably. And I still have problems with that ankle to this day. So they hog-tied me, and they threw me into the back of the sedan. Again, still covered in vomit, crying, in agony, because my rotators, like all my tendons in my shoulder, have been either completely ripped or pulled. My ankle had been just ripped. And that was the start of my journey. I sat there hog-tied for the next 4 hours, crying as I was driven to Miami. And held at the lady that was accompanying us, her house. She was a well-known housing transporter in Miami area during the early 2000s. I'm blanking on her name for the life of me right at the moment. Mary or Sue, and multiple syllables in the last name. But she actually ended up getting convicted of embezzlement in 2004 and serving time in prison because that's a quality person right there. Kidnapping kids and holding them while they're waiting to be forcibly incarcerated. Her own son was a program grad who, while I was at her house for the 2 days that I was waiting to fly to Jamaica, attempted to grope me. So that was another wonderful, pleasant experience. Yeah, we were sitting on the couch, her couch in her living room, and I'll never forget that. She had this like black, gaudy leather couch, like huge brass gold buttons, like just real over the top looking, like, ooh, look at my leather couch. I remember that. And I was sitting there just kind of staring out the window, contemplating my situation. And her son comes and sits down beside me, and he puts his hand on my thigh, and he's like, so you're gonna be going somewhere that's you're probably not even gonna get to be touched by anybody or even hug anybody for a real long time. And I just kind of looked at him, and I was like, if you don't get your hand off of me, I'm going to break your face. And I just said that very coldly and calmly to him. And he looked at me and he started laughing. And he was like, oh yeah, JK is going to have a lot of fun with you. And then he got up and walked away laughing. I didn't quite understand what he meant at that time, but I would soon learn, and you will too. Yeah, so then I was held there for about 48 hours and then flown to Jamaica. I think the worst part about being kidnapped is that you fear it constantly. irrationally in a way. The worst for me seems to be when I'm pregnant. It's like my body and brain know that I love my kids more than anything in this world. And if anybody were to do to them what happened to me, I would become a maniac. And so my mind tortures me the worst when I'm pregnant, with the dreams of my doors being kicked down and my kids being kidnapped in front of me and taken to Jamaica and tortured from infancy, or me being kidnapped again and sent back to the program and my kids being taken from me and put in foster care. That was probably the worst. Is for years the nightmares after I came back home of being kidnapped again and being forced to go back to the program are just, they're awful. Like, there's no need for anybody to have that kind of memory, and that's a memory I have of my parents paying for somebody to kidnap me and hurt me and break me all in the process. So that's how my therapeutic behavioral rehabilitational facility experience began, with a ripped rotator cuff, a ripped ankle, and a messed up left shoulder on top of it too, and fending myself off from potential sexual assault. So that's my kidnapping story. More to come. Stay tuned.